Welcome back to a new episode of Mastering Programming. In today's episode, I will be talking about for loops and while loops. Now, these are two things that you're definitely going to be using in Python. I use it almost every day, and anyone who starts programming will definitely use it regardless of what language you are going to be working on. Now, the first thing is actually understanding what are loops, and as it sounds, it's just looping around a particular object or looping around a particular execution. So repeating the same event basically multiple times. We have two different main common ones that we use, and that is for loops and while loops. For loops are, in my opinion, are much better, but it's just up to preference. But for loops allow you to iterate over like a particular object. So let's say you have a list, you can iterate over each single item, you can observe each single item in that list, while loops continue to iterate based on a condition. So it will repeat the code as many times until a specific condition is met. I think I'm going to start with for loops just because it's more fun to work with. Personally, at least, there's actually no difference in terms of value. And the first thing that I will do in order to work on this is create a shopping list. And that's what we're going to be using throughout the while loop and the for loop to explain things in this tutorial. So I'm just going to call our list shopping list, just like this. And inside of here, it will have different elements that you can buy, or different shopping list items. For example, we are going to be adding milk, and we are going to add a bunch of different grocery items. So we can say milk, we can say orange, we can say apple, and we're just gonna add maybe like 5 or 6. I'm going to say shampoo, and finally water. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 elements here that we're going to be using throughout a for and while loop. And the first thing that I want to go over is actually the syntax. So how are for loops meant to look like? We're going to go over the for loops, and then we're going to start doing the while loops. It's actually very easy, and I guess the template for this, or the easiest way to explain it without using the shopping list yet, is just to create an example. So I can say for, it's a for loop, item in iterable, so the item that we're actually going to iterate over. So in this case, we have an item, and then we're saying that, or identifying the object that we're going to be going over. So if we're going to be creating this, for example, in a real example, or using the shopping list, we can replace item here with shopping item. We want to go over each element in our shopping list. So I'm simply just going to mention shopping list. So I'm saying for each shopping item in our shopping list, so for each item stored on the shopping list, what we're going to be doing is perform a particular action. Now the easiest thing to do is obviously just print. So I'm going to say print shopping item. And what this will do is it's going to go through the entire list. So it's exactly what it says. For each single element, or for each single shopping item, what we in shopping list, so in this list, what we want to do is print the item. So what we should expect when we run this is that it will print milk, orange, apple, shampoo, water individually on their own. So if I save this and click on run over here on the right side, you will see that it does print milk, prints orange, apple, shampoo, and water all separately, because it sees this as an individual item inside the shopping list. Now this is amazing because it allows us to go through a list, and it allows us to view each individual item in that list as its own, and then do specific things with it. For example, I can come over here and I can say shopping item, and I can put, for example, the number 2, and that way I can print this. And what it will do is that you'll realize it's printing the third character in each single word. So we're starting with L, A, P, M, and T, as you can see over here. So it allows us to just go through, and it doesn't matter how long the list is or how big the list is, we can straight away just jump onto each individual item and manipulate it or make changes to it as much as we need, basically, which allows us to do this without having to actually look through the list manually and figuring out which element we want to edit and then edit it. Now the best thing with for loops is that it also works on strings. So let's go ahead and create a string. So I'm just going to say a string, and inside of here we are just going to be putting a name. So I'll say David, and what I'll do is here, let's change it so that we're looping over this variable over here. So I'll change this from saying for shopping item in shopping list, I'll say for character, or let's make it even easier and say for letter in, and I'm going to specify the object that I want to loop over. So I'll say a string. What we want to do is we can say print letter, and if I go ahead and save this or run it, you'll see that it prints each single character on its own, David, or just like this. Now the final example of the for loop that I want to show, which can be very useful, is the following. Now let's say you don't have a list and you want to repeat a code a particular number of times. You can actually use something just called a range, which is very cool, and we can do this by saying for I in range, we're going to open a bracket, and then inside of here we're going to be putting the number that we want to reach. For example, let's say we want to repeat something 10 times. I can say 10, and then I'll say print I, and if I go ahead and run this, it will print from 0 to 9, which is actually 10. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you can make this as big as you want, basically. So if we make it 50 and run it, you'll see that it runs 50 times. And this is a great way if you want to repeat your code multiple times for any reason. This is actually a really good way of doing so without having to actually add it manually, like write the same code like 50 times, which you shouldn't do. You can just use a for loop and then put a range and put whatever code you want over here, and that code will run. Now before we move to while loops, there is something that I want to show, and that is how to pass, or how to, let's say you want to create this function but you don't know what to put inside yet. If I leave this empty, you will realize that at the moment it's giving me an error. And if I go ahead and save this, you'll see that it is telling me expected and indented block. So what it's basically saying is that this function over here is meant to have something else. It's meant to have something to be executed. But because I don't have it yet, and maybe let's say I'm going to think of a solution tomorrow, I don't want to delete this, because sometimes for loops, you just want to continue having it. So what you can do instead is simply provide pass. And now if I save this, it's no longer an error. It's not complaining anymore. And if I run this, nothing will happen. Let me actually clear this so that you see nothing happens. Nothing happens because we're not actually printing anything, but it's not causing an error, which is actually useful. Something else that we can talk about maybe now is the break and the continue. Now you're going to be using for loops and while loops a lot, and sometimes or most of the times you're going to be using them to check for a particular thing. So let's go ahead and actually remove this, and we're going to create another one, and we're going to say for shopping item in shopping list. What we want to do is now we want to use an if statement to check if the item that we're on now is orange, for example. So what I'll do is I'll say if shopping item is equal to, and I'll say orange, then print this is an orange. And now if I save this and run it again, you'll see that it only printed this is an orange when it iterated over the element that was actually an orange, and for the rest of the elements nothing happened. So what we can do to observe this is we can say else. So if it's not an orange, then let's go ahead and print not an orange. And if I go ahead and run this, what you will realize is that for each single element it said not an orange. So we know the code ran through all the elements, but this piece over here that prints this is an orange only ran when the item, the shopping item, was actually an orange. Now let's say you wanted for some reason to stop here as soon as you find out that you're on the orange one. You don't want to continue anymore, you just wanted to find one orange and that's it. What we can do is use something called break. And if I save this, and let's go ahead and clear the results over here and run, you'll realize that instead of iterating, or instead of going through each single list of the element, even though we picked up on the item that we needed, which is orange, now what happens is it will go through everything before it, but once that condition is met, it will break. And what that means is it's basically going to break the loop, it's going to stop it, it's not going to iterate over it anymore. So that's just a really quick way of actually stopping the for loop so that it doesn't continue running after you've already retrieved the item that you needed or the item that you wanted. Let's go ahead and clear this. And now we can use while loops. So for loops, so far we've done iterating over a list, iterating over a string, iterating over a range, and then we also checked how we can use if statements and else statements and break statements all throughout. So what I'll do now is I'm actually going to go ahead and remove all of this, and let's create a while loop. Now while loops are a little bit more different, and the syntax for it is very simple. While condition. That is all there is to it. Once you put this while, anything after it will be a condition, and as long as that condition is met, your code inside of your while statement will just continue to run. And if you don't put a proper condition, it will actually continue running forever, and this whole code will crash and it will cause a problem. So let's have an example, or let's have a look at what this can be. So for this, what I'll use is I'll create a number, and I'll say that number is equal to 5. And the condition here that I'm going to be using is while number is greater than 0. What I want to do is print that, or maybe we can make it even more simple and we can say greater than 0. Now if I go ahead and actually run this code now, the entire code will crash and this whole screen will freeze, and that is because this is a condition that will never be met. It's a condition that will never end. This number right now is 5, and so it will always be greater than 0, so this will continue printing forever and it will crash the entire computer. So what we can do is we can do something to this number to stop it from always being met. So what we can do is we can simply say number is equal to number minus 1, and what this does is that it's going to be reducing the value of number by 1 every single time this runs. And what we can do is we can also print our number to see what it's like. So now if I go ahead and run this, you will see that when it printed that we were greater than 0 when we're at 5, when we're at 4, when we're at 3, when we're at 2, when we're at 1, and then it stopped. Because what happened after that is once this became 1, we ran this code again, which reduced 1 from it, and it became 0, and so this while statement is no longer valid. And what happened is that, well, it stopped working, because that's the whole idea of it. Now you can use while loops or for loops. For me, I feel like while loops are much more beneficial if it comes to a list or a database, or for whatever reason I just want to continue repeating my code until a specific condition is met. While for loops, I'm iterating over the entire list and I want to reach a specific condition as well. It just depends on whether or not, I guess, you know what the quantity or like the index of the item that you're after is. And both of them are pretty cool to use. I'm sure you'll find your own use cases. And if you want to see a full video where I create an ATM system using for loops and while loops and if statements, it's very easy to do. I'll leave it somewhere on the screen now. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy it, and please leave a like and a subscribe, or possibly even a comment if you liked this video. Thanks so much, and I hope to see you in the next episode.